Good morning. Thank you for being here. As you can see, I'm accompanied by Mayor Evans, our District Attorney Brian Green, members of my command staff. I'd like to start by thanking all of our partner agencies who once again answered our call for mutual aid and assisted us on Saturday night, when, like many other major cities in the nation, we experienced multiple shooting incidents. In the past 72 hours nationwide, 83 people have been killed and 316 people have been shot. So thank you to the New York State Police, the Monroe County Sheriff's Office, the Greece Police Department, the Gates Police Department, the Irondequoit Police Department, the 911 Center employees, and our fellow first responders from the Rochester Fire Department and AMR Ambulance. Finally, I cannot speak highly enough about the bravery and dedication of the men and women of the Rochester Police Department who performed without hesitation Saturday night under what were, to say the least, very difficult circumstances. I'm not going to repeat the information in the press release from yesterday, but I will give you an update on the continuing investigations. So far, 3 people have been charged with weapons charges. They were all arraigned this morning. They are all currently still in custody. Our detectives are going over hours of video and interviewing multiple witnesses. We've been working hand in hand with the district attorney's office to hold those who fired weapons accountable for their actions. We know that there were many people at both scenes. Please do your part to hold these folks accountable. If you were there, if you have information, if you have video, reach out to us. Call 911, call 311, call City Hall, call the Chief's office. There's also the Report It app, or there's the email for our central investigations, which is cis@cityofrochester.gov. And of course, these are also all on our websites. As I've said many times before, on any given day, no matter how good we do, we can always do better. So as we do anytime we have a significant incident, we will do a full after-action review and see what else we can do moving forward to not only prevent incidents like this from occurring, but to perhaps deal with them more efficiently when they do occur. But what I can say, based on what we know, is that our officers performed heroically Saturday night. A few hours prior to these incidents, we had been, through most of the evening. Once the fireworks ended, we began the task of assisting folks out of the city, clearing groups that were not moving out of the city, leaving the area, trying to get things in the downtown area cleared up. Despite, on many occasions, my officers had commercial-grade fireworks set off in very close proximity to them, they maintained their composure. They effectively did their jobs. To add to this incredible effort by our officers, I think it's important to note that during this, one of my responding officers, actually a sergeant, was rear-ended by a drunk driver on Genesee Street. Stopped, got out, was talking to the driver, realized the driver was intoxicated, made the arrest, and lo and behold, driver had a 9mm handgun in the vehicle, and this is just a sergeant on patrol gets rear-ended. So, you know, day in and day out, as I've said before, you know, this is who we are and this is what we do. They're out there right now, as we're in here, taking calls, keeping us safe. Thankfully, that officer was treated and released for minor injuries, and none of the officers Saturday night sustained any injuries. Just to give a brief recap without going into the whole release again, officers were clearing lingerers. This was 2 hours after the fireworks. So, you know, we have the bar detail in place. We had the early bar detail. We had officers at MLK Park. We had officers at Parcel 5. We had officers in teams roving about, moving groups along to get folks where they needed to go, try and encourage them to go home and go to bed 2 hours after the fireworks. So we're doing all of that when the officers heard the shots fired. As police officers do, they immediately ran toward the gunfire. During the chaos, they placed tourniquets, potentially 2 life-saving tourniquets, on victims. And because we had so many resources in close proximity, we're able to make 2 stops of what we believed at the time were suspect vehicles, and recovered 3 illegally possessed firearms. So those names were all in the press release. At this time, those folks are still just charged with weapons charges. Too early in the investigation to say if we're actually going to tie them into any of the other incidents. But as I said, they definitely remain in custody. So again, a lot of groups, very chaotic scenes. We had planned for this. We planned for these events months in advance. But again, fireworks were over. We were here doing what we always do, enacting our plan, trying to get folks moved out when this happened. Had it not been for the extra resources we had, I potentially could have been far worse. But again, even with that, with all of the resources that we had, I mean, all of our special teams were here. We brought people in early. We had people stay late. And as so often happens when you have these large scenes, it takes a lot of officers to secure evidence. So again, calling out for mutual aid. Thanks to our partners for coming in and handling calls for service. I can tell you at one point we were tied up with all these scenes. There was a significant backlog in calls for service. So I thank everyone who had to wait for their patience. And, you know, please know that everyone, including our partner agencies throughout the county, were here doing everything we could Saturday night to answer the calls and keep the city safe. So on that, I will hand it over to Mayor Evans, and then we'll both take some questions.
And after I speak, I'll hand it over to District Attorney Brian Green. First off, let me say I am thankful for the men and women of the Rochester Police Department. I think that one of the things that it's important for people to understand is that we could have had significant loss of life had it not been for our first responders, our police officers, as well as our fire, as well as AMR. But our police officers that provided those tourniquets were absolutely critical in terms of saving lives. And as a result, I'm standing here not saying that we have any deaths, that we don't have any homicides, but what we did have is mayhem. Mayhem that is extremely unacceptable. The one point I want to make is that we have made great progress in terms of shootings in our community. And you know, there's often people that say, why do you keep the gun violence emergency? Why do you continue to have that? I think one of you may have written about why is the mayor still having the gun violence emergency even though he has driven down, the city of Rochester has driven down gun violence to historic levels. In fact, this past May, Rochester had the lowest level of shootings in over 25 years this past May compared to other Mays. But what you saw last night is a reason why we continue to do that, because for every gun that we take off the street, every person that we arrest that thinks that they can walk around carrying an illegal firearm, there's someone else that's always thinking about what they can do to escalate a dispute or get even with someone in a large area. And when you have large groups, it is a recipe for disaster. But the other thing that's a recipe for disaster, and I'll touch on this in a moment, is the fact that the fireworks start at 10 o'clock. I know because I get to run a show. The fireworks end at 10:20. So if you're a parent, you bring your child to the fireworks. I bring my kids to the fireworks. My kids are around the same age as some of the kids that hung out long after the fireworks ended. So ends at 10:20, 12:30 you still have kids hanging out. And you don't have adults hanging out. You have some adults, but amongst those adults you have kids as young as 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 years old with zero adult supervision. As you know, I am big on making sure that we have youth development programs for our young people. But we have not yet perfected babysitting services for parents. So it's a problem. This has been a problem that has been bubbling, not only in Rochester, but across the country, but we have seen incidences where it didn't go to violence or had other issues where late at night, we are seeing unaccompanied minors hanging out in places where they should not be. 12:30 is too late for a 12-year-old to be hanging out by themselves, and in many instances younger. It's a recipe for disaster, it's a recipe for violence, and it's a recipe for what we saw yesterday night. Well, I'm sorry, Sunday morning. 8 people ending up in an emergency room. I'm thankful that we have 3 individuals in custodies. I'm thankful for the mutual aid and the technology that was used. I want to reiterate for the community to please send in tips. You can call the mayor's office, 428-7045. You can use our Reported app. I'm very grateful for the many residents and citizens that send tips to the mayor's office through the Reported app. And all you have to do is text 63975 or download the app. It is completely anonymous. We have had people that have sent pictures of people carrying guns, and they've done it anonymously, and we've gotten that over to the Rochester Police Department for follow-up and oftentimes arrests. And then also CIS@cityofrochester.gov. These are all things and tools that people can use confidently, and then obviously call 911 if you see or say something. Now, what I want to announce today is that, as you know, the gun violence state of emergency gives me broad powers to be able to secure property and life and safety. And public safety is my #1 priority. But I want to tell you that yesterday, I instructed my legal counsel, City of Rochester's legal counsel, to carefully assess and see how we can implement meaningful policies, including a curfew, to ensure that we keep our city safe. We cannot have instances of minors being unaccompanied and their parents are nowhere to be found. I want to say that we are looking into this. A final decision has not been made because this takes a lot of work. It's a lot of work on the resources of the city, including the police department and social service agencies and the county and everyone else. But this past weekend was People's Exhibit A of why something like this has to be explored, but has to be explored in the legal context to make sure that, number one, it sticks, number one, it's effective, and number 3, that it's just not an empty promise. So it is high time for us to look at that as an option. And I'll say, sadly, we were not alone. Buffalo, Niagara Falls, Boston, Chicago, Dayton, Hilton Head, Pensacola, New York City, Coney Island. And all the articles say, well, you know, it's the 4th of July. This happens on the 4th of July. I want to say no. This should not happen on the 4th of July. It shouldn't happen in Rochester, and it should not happen anywhere else. This gun culture has got to end. And in Rochester, we want to lead the way and use every single tool that we can to make sure that it ends. We have made tremendous progress, but that progress will be lost if we let our guards down. I am going to do my part, but I'm going to ask the community to do its part in 2 ways. 1, making sure that you give us any information that you have. There were a lot of people down there. There were a lot of people with cell phones, hundreds of people. That means that you are almost mini detectives. You have phones. If you have evidence that you want to send over, please send it over. It will remain anonymously. And then lastly, I will say to parents, if you need help for your children, you can get them help. But I will say that you have to ensure that minors are not out at any time of night. There was no reason for anybody under the age of 18, or I would even say under the age of 21, to be out at almost 1 o'clock in the morning after everything had just about ended. You're not old enough to get into bars. Things are closed. These kids should have been at home playing Roblox. Or having a good time with their family, not out unsupervised. And if a child is going to be out late, they need to be supervised by an adult. It's what I do with my children, and it's what I would ask our community to do for their children. So stay tuned on our on how we decide to deploy a curfew. I know you're going to have lots of questions. You're going to say, when are you going to do it? How long are you going to do it? I don't have any of those answers yet, because I want to make sure that I get my legal opinion from my legal department, and then we will take it from there. And then last thing I want to say, I want to thank, again, our partners. I want to thank the Rochester Police Department, partners at the County DA's office, Sheriff Baxter, New York State Police, Governor's Office, and the GIV, ATF, Marshals, and everyone else who are working to keep our community safe. We will remain resilient. We will continue to make changes as needed, and we will succeed in making Rochester safe and prosperous for all, but it is going to involve all of us in this community working together. And with that, I will turn it over to the District Attorney, Brian Green, and then back to the Chief.
Thank you, Mayor. Good morning, everyone. We all know why we're here today. I'm sure I'll reiterate a few points that were made by Chief Smith and Mayor Evans, but I do have some other information I'd like to add. You know, this was a holiday weekend that should have been spent celebrating with friends and family and neighbors, and instead that became just the backdrop for many individuals in our community, the victims' families, the witnesses, and all of our first responders who worked on this case. We witnessed incredible acts of senseless violence, and that's unacceptable in our community. As you've already heard, 8 people were shot and 1 individual was stabbed in 2 separate incidents. Most of the victims are juveniles and teenagers, including a 12-year-old. These aren't just statistics. These are members of the community whose lives have been forever impacted by the reckless and criminal actions of just a few individuals. And I can't thank enough everybody who worked on this case, from RPD and all of the partnering law enforcement agencies to the other first responders and medical professionals, including those at the hospitals who cared for all of those individuals during a time of what I'm sure was absolute chaos. But I'd also like to thank Special Assistant District Attorney Aaliyah Fowler from our Non-Fatal Shooting Bureau, who responded alongside our PD to both of those shooting scenes over the weekend. Several years ago, the office created the Non-Fatal Shooting Bureau in cooperation with the Division of Criminal Justice Services and the Rochester Police Department and other partners. And we send assistant district attorneys out to non-fatal shooting scenes, just as we've always done for homicide scenes now. We are mustering and putting forth every resource we can into this fight against this senseless violence. The investigation remains active, and I want to assure the people that the district attorney's office will continue working hand in hand with our law enforcement partners to identify those responsible. And we'll pursue the evidence wherever it leads. We'll seek to hold every individual involved fully accountable under the law. Yesterday evening, Jadell Williams and Larry Dillon were arraigned in Cap Court on criminal possession of a weapon in the 2nd degree and 3rd degree charges, and bail was set at $50,000 cash, $100,000 bond, or $150,000 partially secured bond. A 17-year-old, as was noted, was also charged with criminal possession of a weapon in the 2nd degree. But these charges just represent the beginning of what is still an active investigation, and we anticipate additional investigative actions in the days ahead. And to reiterate what both Chief Smith and Mayor Evans said, to those who were present or know what happened, now is the time to come forward. Someone knows who was involved, someone saw something, and your information could make the difference in bringing those responsible to justice. We cannot solve crimes like this alone, and we certainly cannot prosecute cases like this as effectively without eyewitnesses. Public safety is a shared responsibility, and meaningful cooperation between the community and law enforcement is essential. Our community should be a place where families should feel comfortable gathering, and where residents and visitors alike should be able to enjoy everything our community has to offer. We cannot allow a handful of violent individuals to continue defining our city or robbing our community of those opportunities or that sense of security. So to those responsible, let me be clear. We have not, do not, and will not tolerate this violence. We will continue working tirelessly with Rochester Police Department and other partners to identify you so that RPD can arrest you, and then we will prosecute you to the fullest extent possible. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Questions? Why don't we start with Burke and we'll go this way. You got anything for me?
I count, excuse me, I was ready to go last. I count 7 shooting victims who were teenagers. In your experience as a police officer, what does that do to their life?
Well, although, we say non-life-threatening injuries, I mean, a gunshot wound is a life-changing injury. I mean, even if you recover physically, there's mental repercussions. It's a life-changing event.
I would only add that there are studies that show that, I would also add that there are studies that show that individuals who suffer that kind of violence in that kind of environment do become more prone to engaging in that kind of violent behavior in the future. There are studies out about that. This is not just a problem of crime. This is an epidemic, as other people have put forth in recent years. This is certainly something that needs to be addressed from multiple fronts.
And don't forget about the familial aspect of that, the family aspect. If you're in a family and it's your brother, your sister, or your child that was shot, or a bystander that witnessed that, those are traumas that you will carry throughout the rest of your life. I had someone shot outside my house when I was a kid. 2 guys that had just got released from prison. They got in a fight. One guy gets shot. I still remember that. And that was over 30 years ago. So you take these things with you, both the victims as well as the families and the community members. And this is why it's so insidious. And this is why gun violence is such something that has to be seen as not natural, because you carry these things with you for the rest of your life. And it changes a community. It changes the psyche of a community. And this is why I try to dramatize it so much. And even with the progress that we have, why we just can't stop, why we can't let our foot off the gas. This is a perfect example of it. We've had a great last couple of years from a numerical perspective. But even when one person is shot, it still has an effect on the broader community. And that's why these folks work so hard day in and day out to try to get the perpetrator, to try to get illegal guns off the street. I mean, I should point out that one of these guns was a ghost gun. Another one of the guns had an automatic switch. This tells you what the men and women in uniform are up against, the firepower that they are up against. And I would ask everyone to take a moment to appreciate that element of this, the dangerousness of the job that these folks deal with on a daily basis. I'm the mayor, so I get to see it close up. But I think many people have no idea the level of firepower that these folks, sometimes seen and unseen, have to deal with on a regular basis.
Yeah.
Tom Butker, with a 12-year-old, is there anything, like, what do you do with the adults or the older teens that hang out with the 12-year-old? Why are they hanging out with the 12-year-old?
Well, the question is I think in some instances you have people hanging out with kids, but there are also instances where maybe not in this particular case, this conversation around curfew conversation is because we have also come into contact with 12-year-olds just hanging out. Either way, a 12-year-old is a minor. A minor has a parent, and the parent has the ultimate responsibility for that child. What could happen to that parent? That's a conversation for the legal side, for a lawyer. I'm not an attorney, but I will say that I know that I'm responsible for my 11, almost 12-year-old if he was to leave the house. So that's a conversation that we need to have as a community. The bottom line is that I haven't met anyone yet, in all the phone calls that I've gotten, that thinks that it's a good idea for a 12-year-old or 11-year-old to be out at 12:30 at night with no adult supervision. If anybody thinks that's okay, I'd like to hear from you.
Would there be any adult repercussion legally? Like, say some of these people are 18, 19, 20, and yet they have a 12-year-old or 13-year-old.
I think that's too early to tell. I don't know if Brian wants to weigh in on something like that, but again, I think you have to look at each case-by-case basis. What you're assuming is that a 12-year-old was hanging with an 18 or 19-year-old. We don't know if that's the case or not.
Yeah, I would concur with Mayor Evans' point about it being early days in the investigation still. We don't know exactly what the circumstances are surrounding who the juveniles and teenagers were with, or whether they have parents, or whether their parents were there, or anything like that. All of those details will need to be fleshed out before any decisions could be made on charging parents. I will say that the only statute in the penal law that I'm aware of off the top of my head that would address that circumstance would be endangering the welfare of a child. The problem with that statute in this context is that it carries with it two very high hurdles to charge and prove. First, we would have to get into the family circumstances enough to know that the parent did not reasonably exercise due diligence in preventing or in the supervision of the child. And then there are only 4 circumstances that would allow for it to be charged. If there is that lack of reasonable diligence, then the child either, well, really the only one that's relevant here would have to be a person in need of supervision, because the individuals who we know the ages of right now are all victims. They didn't do anything wrong that we're aware of, right? So we would have to prove those family circumstances first, and then prove that they were actually a person who, as defined in the Family Court Act, are a person in need of supervision. So it's not an easy case to make here in New York, but it is being explored.
And just let me say, the larger issue is, so your question was extremely specific, but I want to look at the larger global message that I want to send here, because this is just one instance in which we have had unsupervised young people gathering in places late night. And that's what we need to deal with globally, because that is how you prevent a lot of what you saw last night, and in other instances, some reported, some not reported, where you have young people under the age of 18, under the age of 21, congregating and involved in activities that are not constructive, positive, and past their bedtime. That's the larger issue that I think I want people to really zero in on. I mean, you always will have these specifics, but the broader issue is, ladies and gentlemen, a 11 or 12-year-old should not be out at 12:30 at night unsupervised without a parent or guardian, period. That's the larger issue. That's the takeaway. And the question is, what do we do about that? And is there something that we can do about it? I believe there is. But how we execute it will be something that we will talk about in the coming days. But let's just keep the larger issue. Larger issue is, if you're 12 or 13 and it's almost 1 o'clock in the morning, you should not be out. We have had minors under the age of 16 out at 2 o'clock in the morning. So this is a larger issue that we want to make sure people keep top of mind.
Mayor, the city has looked into curfew in the past. The city council researched it, and it didn't go anywhere because of cost, and there was opposition to it. And do you think it worked now?
We'll see. I mean, I think we'll see. There are a lot of different ways in which you can do curfews. You can do them at certain times. You can do them around certain events. You can do them during the summer. There's all types of things that would have to be looked at. And again, I'm not prepared to go into any specifics on what we're going to do, how we're going to do it, how it would roll out, et cetera, et cetera. It's just something that needs to be talked about, and I want it to be transparent and say that it's something I'm exploring. But I don't have any details or announcing anything on a curfew and when it's going to start. Okay, let me be clear about that. But what I am telling you is from a transparency perspective, is that it is something that I am seriously looking into. I think it's a shame that I have to look into it, because I believe that the village should make sure, our community should make sure that you don't have 12-year-olds out at 1 and 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning. Gino?
In 2008, the appellate court ruled that the curfew that Duffy had tried to put into place was unconstitutional. And that was directed towards minors, and it's been 17, 18 years since then. But that case, as far as I understand it, still stands. How do you square that of trying to talk about we're thinking about doing this curfew? It's okay for us all to say, yeah, 12-year-olds shouldn't be out, but it's already been deemed unconstitutional.
It's been deemed unconstitutional, but the case did talk about ways in which if you were going to do a curfew, the way in which you would do it. But again, I'll go back to my original point. We're not announcing anything right now. If we did roll something out, we will make sure that it would, number one, pass legal muster and that it could be done in a way that is effective. But to underscore the point I just made 3 times already, is that there is not anything to announce here other than the fact that this is something that we are looking at exploring in some form. There are cities that have them. Detroit has a curfew. Washington, D.C. has a curfew. There are other cities that we could look at, but obviously we want to make sure that it is legal because, to your point, in 2008, a appellate judge said the Rochester's current form of its curfew almost 20 years ago didn't pass legal muster. The question is, what would and how would it be implemented? We'll take one more question, then we got to go. Last question, yes.
Do you believe that these curfews would work, and is there a precedent set in New York State already on curfews?
There are some. I'm not sure if Buffalo has a curfew, but there are places in New York State that currently have curfews. Yes, would they work? It is a tool. Anything I have is a tool. Anyone that says that one thing is a silver bullet, they don't know what they're talking about. There is not one thing that is going to solve the myriad of challenges that we have in our city and in our country. Anything that you have is just a tool. And I'm all for using every tool that you have in your toolbox. And if you are effective, if that tool is effective, then you continue to use it. I think that a message does need to be sent, as I said at the top, that if you are a minor and it's late at night, you should not be congregating without adult supervision, period. There's not much you should be doing at 1 o'clock in the morning other than going to bed or having a slumber party or being at home, having a good time, right? I think that that's something that we all should be able to agree on. As a country, we disagree on a lot of things, but I hope, but I wouldn't be surprised, I would sincerely hope and pray that everyone within the city of Rochester and in our country can think that it's not a good idea for a 12-year-old or an 11-year-old or even a 15-year-old to be out at 12:30 at night alone without adult supervision, getting involved in mischief. If they're doing something positive, they would have an adult supervising them, right? And that's fine, because the adult is there to take care of them. So again, thank you very much. Yep, all right, we're good. Please put out that information, report it, major crimes, 911. As a community, we need to make sure that we address these pressing issues in our community. Thank you so much, everybody.